Hey guys, Anthony here. I'm so excited to record this video because not only do I want to show you exactly how Ryan was able to go from literally not confident, stressed out before his exams and not even sure if he was going to go into uni to getting into his dream uni course of engineering. I want to show you his old approach, his new approach, and I've kind of made it in a systematic kind of diagram way, just as a unique, more illustrative way to help you guys visualize everything. But also in this video, I wanted to go through what Ryan was feeling before versus after, and also his mum's perspective on how everything worked at the end. So let's dive straight in. So Ryan's starting point. So his marks are actually plateauing at 40 to 60%. A lot of students actually experience this where their marks end up plateauing. I'm not saying all students plateau at 40 to 60%, but that's just Ryan, right? His only subject that was performing at an 80% level was his PDHPE subject. And as I said before, he did want to get into engineering, but because his marks were so low and his average was so low, his projected ATAR was also too low to actually get into engineering. There was one point that he even told me before we started working together that he even felt like giving up because he thought there was no point in even trying anymore. And yeah, that's what Ryan was starting with, both his mental and academic state for working with me. And obviously he has the common struggles of, constant procrastination. He's always falling behind in work, and sometimes it freezes up in exams. And obviously this is super disappointing and discouraging, especially when you study really hard and you still blank. One thing that I do as a mentor is not only try to understand where they are right now, so their starting point, but why they're actually struggling with the things that they're struggling with. Right, so I want to get to the root cause. Obviously, Ryan was working very hard, but was constantly disappointed with results. But why was that the case? He mentioned to me that he was overwhelmed with content and he didn't know where to even start. So that obviously just shows to me that there's something wrong with his study structure. He's also mentioned to me that he's not absorbing anything that he studies. So no matter how hard he studies, everything that goes into his brain goes out. So that obviously shows to me that he doesn't know how to study the most effectively, and he doesn't know how to study in a way that works for himself. The next thing, which is kind of intertwined with the previous two dot points, was he didn't know how to catch up. But the biggest thing is he didn't understand how to apply knowledge correctly in exams. That's fully related to his exam strategy and exam technique, because I'm sure everyone understands that no matter how much content you have in your head, if you don't know how to apply it properly the way the markers want, you're still not going to get the marks. So that's exactly what Ryan was struggling with. And these are the problems that we had to solve in order for him to go from his starting point to his ending point. Now, before I show you Ryan's transformation, I wanted to go through exactly how we were able to go from his old approach to his new approach, so it gives you a contextual visualization on how we were able to get Ryan from his starting position to end up getting an offer from his dream uni course. So Ryan's old approach was very cyclical. He would go to school, go to class, just like everyone else, and write notes also like everyone else. When he gets home, he'll reread those notes and do a few practice questions. And honestly, like most students, this type of practice comes quite randomly. He might do some textbook questions, some past paper questions, some questions that his teacher gave him, but that's kind of it. There's no other things that he could go off of other than finding more past papers online. So his revision was quite non-structured. He didn't really know what to actually do when he came back home. Sometimes he felt like doing math, sometimes he felt like doing English, sometimes he felt like doing physics, but there was no real structure, and every single time he sat down at the desk, he didn't really know what to actually attack. So what actually happened before the exams? Because his revision was not structured, he didn't really have much clarity on what to actually do and how to actually study, and all he really had was to rely on his notes that he's written and some random practice that he did. He ends up cramming before the exams. And I'm sure you know already, cramming creates stress. You go into the test overwhelmed, and because you don't really believe in the preparation that you've done before the exams, you go into the exam not confident at all. And obviously that leads to disappointing exam results over and over again. Not because Ryan was dumb, but because he was doing the same thing over and over again. It was the same system. There was not much change in it. And obviously when you don't change a cycle that hasn't been working, the results most likely wouldn't change either. So what actually happened when he got disappointing exam results over and over again? He finally made the jump to do tutoring. And that's the traditional approach. A lot of students take this approach, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with it. Tutoring does work with some students. Both Ryan, his problem wasn't the content itself. It was how he was digesting the content, how he was applying the content, how he was actually revising, studying, preparing for the exams. But what tutoring did for Ryan was he just gave him more books to practice, more notes to write down, and honestly, just more content he had to cover. That led to him cramming even more, becoming more overwhelmed with the amount of stuff he had to do. And obviously, as you can see here, it just led to the same cycle over and over again. And that's what basically happened with Ryan. His problem wasn't that he needed more content to practice. His problem was more how he was able to digest, apply, understand, study, revise the content, all of the hows. Tutoring school gives you the what's. But if a student is struggling with the hows like Ryan, more content will just lead to a more rigorous, stressful cycle as shown through here. So understanding this, Ryan and his family finally took a new route and took the new approach. I'm not going to sit here and say this is more systemized, is better than an old approach, because that's up to you to decide. But at the end of the day, this is what helped Ryan escape that rigorous cycle of getting disappointing marks over and over again and finally achieve what he wanted to at the end of year 12. So just like before, Ryan would go to school, go to class and absorb the school content. But this time with the mentorship, what we did was personally work together one-on-one to find out exactly what he was struggling with and what was actually holding him back on a foundational level. So as I went through before with what Ryan was actually struggling with, he was struggling with the study structure that actually worked for him, how to actually retain information and study properly so you can first understand the content on a deeper level, and second, be able to remember it in the exam. And the third thing, and arguably the most important thing, was how he was able to execute in the exam. So basically how he was able to apply the content that he's learned, that he's understood, that he's retained into the exam the way the markers want him to. Now you can pause on this screen and actually read about what each of these 3 skills actually taught Ryan, but the most important thing to note is that teaching them these skills is actually the easy part. Keeping Ryan accountable and making sure he was consistent in applying these newly learned skills was actually the main crux of the mentorship. Learning these skills is all well and good. Yes, having an effective study structure allows them to avoid burnout, have a better school-life balance, give them more clarity when they actually study. But if Ryan wasn't applying these skills every single week before the exams and throughout his year 12, it wouldn't really matter because he'll go back to his old habits. Same thing with learning the skills of true retention, how to actually take effective but concise notes, how to actually recall knowledge and have a holistic understanding of the content. All of this is super important, but if Ryan isn't applying these week in, week out, none of these skills that he's gained will actually reflect on his exams. So that's why the accountability and consistent refinement is so important, especially in the mentorship and especially with the students that I mentor, because Ryan is a living testimony on why gaining these skills is not only for 1 exam, 2 exams, or even for the rest of year 12, but for his future uni, for his future career as well. And with that being said, with the consistent refinement, with the consistent accountability, he was now feeling prepared and more confident going into the exams. And that showed through not only his attitude, but also through the exam results. And as you can see, he went from having a projected ATAR of being too low to actually get into uni in the first place to getting into his dream course of engineering. Now, there's not much to say here with Ryan's transformation. Obviously, it's obvious that not only him and his mom were satisfied, but if you want to pause on this, you can see exactly what Ryan had to say at the end of the mentorship on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is what his mom, Cass, had to say with his mentorship after he finished off with me. You can also see numerous other testimonials from students, parents on my website, but I just wanted to keep this short and concise to give you guys a bit more context on how I was able to help Ryan transform his academic life, even though he only started with me at the beginning of his trials. With that being said, I look forward to finally being able to formally meet you and your family on our strategy call, and I'll see you very soon.